I am Rick Wilson. I'm an assistant professor of art, and I teach specifically graphic design, interactive design, and printmaking occasionally, and then also letterpress printing. This first piece was a print that I did of Django Reinhardt, who is a jazz guitarist from the 30s and 40s. I actually was doing research. I've always enjoyed his music, and so I did a little research on him and came across this wonderful photograph of him. And so I tracked down the photographer, and the photographer had passed away, but his son still held all the rights to the photos, and he gave me permission to use the photo in the print. So I started with the photograph and converted it to a halftone, and then went through and put a bunch of texture behind it. An interesting story, he and his wife actually traveled like gypsies, and she sold cellophane flowers, and her wagon caught on fire. And in an attempt to save her, he lost one of his fingers. His music is just incredible, considering he's only using 3 fingers to do all the picking. So I decided to do the print and started dropping all these different layers and textures into the background, and then put the image of Django on top. So the print is titled Gypsy. So that was one of my early prints when I first started here at the university. Along those same lines, I was doing some research on the Beat generation writers and poets, and I came across some really nice images, actually some images that Allen Ginsberg had taken of the guys at the time, and just thought they were really interesting and fascinating. I did a lot of research on and read a lot of their work, and found some images of them later in life. And the concept behind it was I was going to contrast their words from their youth with their images later in life. And so I titled the pieces appropriately. So the Ginsberg piece was titled Whimper, and the text actually that's in the print is from his epic poem Howl. And so it was the idea of the words of youth compared with older age. And all 3 of these guys, the prints that I did of Kerouac, Burroughs, and Ginsberg, were all of them found fame in youth, and then I think they worked the rest of their careers to try and recapture some of that. I think their best known pieces were their first pieces that they did. Kerouac with On the Road, and Burroughs with Naked Lunch. So all 3 of the pieces have that concept behind them. This is a picture from this print of Burroughs much later in life with Naked Lunch, one of his books, with the copy from that. So the same idea of layering textures with a halftone image of the person that I'm doing the print about. So the Kerouac piece was the same way. This was an image of Jack Kerouac much later in life, and the title of this one was Self-Destruct, and it was the idea of his life falling apart after the initial success of On the Road, and trying to recapture some of that throughout his life. And obviously the alcoholism, drug him down eventually, and so he ended up, never reaching that same type of success. The next 2 or 3 prints were really just playing with the process of taking a photograph. Most of them are photographs that I've taken of different places that I've visited, and trying to break them down into multiple colors and put them back together again in a print using silkscreen to try and create that same type, the illusion of it being a photograph when actually it's not. It's made up of lines and solid shapes, and it's just layers and layers of color to try and get that photographic effect. So the 3 prints, the heart, the hip, and the shoulder, were all an idea I was playing with probably in my 2nd or 3rd year here at the university. The idea of a way to visually, describe tenure. And so I titled them Tenure 1, 2, and 3. And I was contrasting the old medical illustration of these body parts along with their name, and then an alternate definition that actually had more to do with tenure than it had to do with the body part. So, and the same idea of layering color and creating interesting texture and then putting the image over the top. This one with the cigar, there were 4 pieces in that series. And I teach a history of graphic design course in the department, and one of my favorite periods is turn of the century Germany advertising posters. Plaque-Still is the technical name, or poster style. And so I wanted to create some posters that were an homage to that era, but were more modern in terms of what they were talking about, and associated them all with Columbia. So Columbia and Missouri as well. These were all they all represent my vices, my own personal vices, smoking cigars and going to horse races and that sort of thing. So it was I was having fun with that idea. And I was teaching the screen printing class at the time, so the students got to interact while I was working on these big pieces, and it was a lot of fun to do those. Actually, the cigar one was named Uncle Vito because one of my students said, that looks just like my Uncle Vito. So that's why I titled that one that. So, but they were a lot of fun to do, and working in that kind of scale is difficult with screen printing, trying to get flat colors down, which is what screen printing is known as a way to get large areas of color, which is why I started doing screen printing in the first place. I started out here at the university and in graduate school doing relief prints, and I've got a lot of woodcut large relief prints that I did, and I started experimenting with screen printing as a way to add large areas of color behind the black and white images. And once I started doing screen printing, I realized that that was another area that I could look into. It has a very prominent role in the history of design, and so I actually moved into screen printing, and I've not really combined the two up to this point yet. So the relief printing and the screen printing together were initially what I was trying to go for, and we also had letterpress equipment over in the Art Annex that nobody had used for years, and so my colleagues asked me to go over there and work with that equipment a little bit and get it back up to speed. So we got the letterpress lab up and going, and letterpress is really hot right now in the design field. 10 years ago, you could buy a press for a couple $100, and now some of them go for $3,000–4,000. It's just an old technology that also has a really prominent place in the history of design, and the students just love the letterpress stuff. So I've started doing posters and books and stuff with letterpress, and that's probably where my research is going to go from here. A way of combining all of these different areas of printmaking technically along with graphic design in order to produce, I think books are probably where I'm going to head next. I've done 2 or 3 smaller books, but I'd also like to get into larger books as well, whether it's art or whether it's just writing, and printing them letterpress.